All right, let's talk about estate planning. We're going to dive into some of the biggest myths out there. These are the ideas that sound totally logical, but man, they can cause some serious problems for the people you care about most.
You probably heard this one, or maybe even thought it yourself. It's such a comforting idea, right? We trust our family, we love them, so of course they'll know what to do. It just feels like everything will kind of work itself out.
And there it is. That's the billion-dollar question. What happens when all those good intentions run smack into a wall of confusion because there are no clear instructions? Well, that's where the trouble really begins. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Look, if any of these myths are ringing a bell, you are definitely not alone. Most people don't put this off because they don't care. They do it because they're working with bad information. So let's clear the air and set the record straight.
Okay, first up, the danger of assumptions. This is a biggie. It's all about that myth that someone else, your partner, your family, will just automatically be able to step in and handle things for you.
Yeah, this one is huge. There's this pervasive idea that planning is only for married people with kids and a mortgage. But is that really true? What's the reality behind that? So this is where the conventional wisdom gets flipped completely on its head. When you're married, the law often has a sort of built-in default setting, a legal next of kin. But if you're single, poof, that default is gone. A plan becomes even more critical because you are the only one who can set the rules.
Without your instructions, these super personal questions don't just get answered by magic. They get decided by a long and often really expensive court process, and the person making the call might be a judge who has never even met you. A plan is what keeps you in the driver's seat. Here's another assumption that comes straight from the heart. You've built a life with someone. You're committed. So it just seems obvious that your long-term partner would have the same rights as a spouse. It just makes sense.
But here's the brutal truth. The law is very black and white on this. It doesn't matter if you've been together 5 years or 50. If you are not legally married, your partner might have no legal standing at all. Without a will that specifically names them, they could be completely shut out. And that brings us right back to where we started, with that first incredibly common myth. But now we can see it's not just some hopeful thought. It's an assumption that can have some really painful consequences for the people you love.
And this really gets to the core of it. Planning isn't about a lack of trust in your family. It's an act of deep care for them. You're giving them a roadmap. You're making sure they don't have to guess or worse, fight during an already brutal time. At the end of the day, you're giving your loved ones the gift of clarity. You're taking a massive burden right off their shoulders. Now, let's switch gears and look at another category of myths, the ones we tell ourselves. This next group is what I call the not me myths. They're all about identity. These are the stories we tell ourselves based on who we think we are, and more importantly, who we think we aren't. This is probably the #1 refrain of all time. It's the perfect 2-for-1 excuse that lets us just kick the can down the road. It feels like a problem for future you to worry about. But here's the reality check. The need for a plan is triggered by adulthood and having responsibilities, not by your age or your bank balance. And as we all know, life doesn't wait for you to hit a certain age before it throws you a curveball. Most people hear the word estate and they immediately think of mansions and yachts. But let's just redefine it right now. An estate is simply everything you own and everything you're responsible for. So if you have a bank account, you have an estate. Got a job? You have an estate. Have a pet you take care of. Guess what? You have an estate. It's that simple. So let's just throw that whole idea that planning is for the wealthy out the window. It's a tool for everyone to control what happens to their life and their stuff, no matter how much or how little they have. Okay, so we've busted myths about who needs a plan. But what happens after you've made one? This brings us to our final and maybe the most subtle myth of them all.
Oh, it feels so good to check that big item off the to-do list, doesn't it? You did the responsible thing, you created a plan, now you can just file it away and never think about it again, right?
Well, not so fast. Your life isn't static, so your plan can't be either. You gotta think of it like a living document. Every major life event, getting married, having a baby, buying a house, getting divorced, that's a giant blinking sign telling you it's time for a checkup to make sure your plan still reflects your actual life.
And this is so, so important. An old plan that names an ex-spouse or doesn't include the kids you had 5 years ago can create just as much confusion and conflict as having no plan to begin with. This is absolutely not a one-and-done task.
So, after busting all these myths, where does that leave us? What's the single most important thing to take away from all of this?
It all boils down to this. The reason these myths are so powerful is that they're based on bad information. The first and most important step you can take is just to replace those faulty assumptions with the facts. That is the foundation for everything else.
So, as we finish up, I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Which myth were you holding on to? Just recognizing that is the most powerful first step you can possibly take. Thanks for joining me.